with the question, to COVID or not to COVID. I know it's going to be really tempting to want to write about COVID-19 or cover it with your story. But I think that there are more fruitful and less fruitful angles that you can take with that. For instance, anything having to do with coronavirus diaries, or what it's like to be trapped in a house with your family, or um, how you are feeling from day to day, things like that. That's all very useful to have for posterity and for yourself. But you've got to imagine that there are millions and millions of people who are going through similar things in their homes right now. So, in order to do that kind of a story, you would have to have a really distinctive, original, insightful angle. Um, you want to avoid at all costs doing something generic, right? And that includes things like your moment of reflection being that the coronavirus is actually bringing people together, or something, some cliche like that. Like, try and stay away from all of that stuff. Um, so if that's what you don't want to do, what can you do? Uh, so you want to ask yourself, is there something unique about the story that you're going to be telling? This doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be talking to the first known case of coronavirus diagnosed in Pennsylvania or something like that. Um, but can you arrive at some sort of original insight with the person that you're talking to, or with the angle that you're taking? If you can't, then probably don't cover it. And also, get an idea of what other kinds of stories are out there on a similar topic, so that you know whether you're arriving at original insights that nobody has come to before, or whether you're just sort of repeating the same sort of thing that people are already doing. So what you might think about is trying to come up with angles that people might not expect. People that are affected by the coronavirus, uh, unexpected victims or unexpected costs that might not immediately come to mind, or unexpected beneficiaries. Um, I am very interested. There's a board game store in Gettysburg, and they're doing in home deliveries, and I've got to wonder what kind of business they're doing um, now. Uh, the trouble is that you've got to take stories like that, and you've got to find one story to act as your central kernel. You can't just go through and do a story on all the different sort of old school analog businesses that are suddenly doing well in coronavirus, or checking to see if they're doing well. That's just a regular old news story, and that's not what This American Life is about. You've got to have your anecdote, and you've got to have your moment of reflection. So you really want to dig in and kind of tell one story. So if you can find some story like that, then maybe you're looking at something useful. Um, Things that I think about a lot right now. I used to teach, for about 6 months, I taught in a prison in Illinois, and I know that a lot of the guys that I taught are still there, and they're not able to do any kind of quarantine really in prisons, and the virus has the potential to just run through there like a fire. So, but then with stories like that, you've also got to ask yourself, who can I talk to that would be realistic, that would be effective, and that would be kind? So, a story about people who are stuck in prison, you're not going to want to talk to people whose relatives are in prison. That's an unkind demand to make on their emotions at a time like this. You obviously can't talk to the people in prisons themselves. So if you back all the way out of those circles to talk to people who are advocates for people in prison, are you going to get enough from that story to tell the story that you want to tell, or are you going to end up sort of on a fact-finding mission? And again, remember, the point of these stories is not to tell facts; they're to tell stories. They're to arrive at insight. They're not to give information necessarily. Of course, it might be that you start talking to somebody who's doing this kind of advocacy work and you keep pressing and following up on questions, and you end up with something completely different but equally or perhaps more fascinating. So that's a possibility too, but be careful not to fall into a trap of having a cool concept but no anecdote. That's exactly the problem that Ira Glass was talking about. Just to close out after what feels like a little bit of rambling, it is okay to do your project on the coronavirus, but you want to make sure that you have a unique, original insight and are not just repeating the same sort of talking points and experiences that lots of people across the country are having.